All right, so today we're going to dive into some reports that are swirling around about Donald Trump and his team.
Yeah, so there's a lot of chatter, about how they might be hitting some roadblocks when it comes to like staffing a potential administration.
Yeah.
Specifically, it seems like the big sticking point is this whole loyalty thing.
This demand for like absolute loyalty.
Exactly. And we're going to be looking at this through the lens of a video from the Ring of Fire YouTube channel.
Right, their video. Let me see. It's called Trump's Team Struggles to Hire Staffers Over His Insane Loyalty Demands. Catchy, right?
Definitely grabs your attention.
And what we really want to do is kind of unpack this.
Yeah.
Like, what's at the heart of this reported hiring struggle? Why is it happening? What are the reasons people are talking about? And then, like, what could this all mean down the road?
What are the potential consequences?
Yeah, exactly. So jumping right in, it seems like the biggest thing everyone's pointing to is this intense focus on loyalty.
Oh, absolutely.
The commentary really highlights that it's got to be like MAGA loyalists, quote unquote.
Like only those folks are even being considered for these positions.
Right, and it even ties into this whole Project 2025 thing.
Yeah, which for folks who might not be familiar is basically a documented plan for a potential conservative, presidential transition. It's out there.
Okay, so they're really laying down the law here. It's not subtle.
It's definitely not subtle.
Like they're making it super clear.
Yeah, and you see this reflected in the way they talk about it, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like there's this quote from Republican Representative Mike Waltz.
Oh, right.
Where he basically says point blank that anyone working in the National Security Council, if Trump becomes president, they have to be fully aligned with his America First agenda.
No ifs, ands, or buts.
Exactly. And it's interesting because anything that even hints at a different approach or like a different viewpoint is immediately labeled as fake news.
Wow.
It really shows you just how important this unwavering, like total agreement is to them.
They're really drawing a line in the sand, huh?
Absolutely.
But it seems like this very strict stance, this hard line, might be causing some problems, on a practical level.
Well, yeah, if you can't find enough people to staff the positions, that's a problem.
Totally. The commentary mentions a CBS News report that says Trump's team is having a really hard time filling these potential administration roles.
They're saying it's because they can't find enough people who check all the boxes,
Meaning enough people who meet these crazy loyalty standards.
Precisely. And the report even goes as far as saying that the staffing levels are woefully inadequate right now.
Woefully inadequate. So then the question becomes, why? Right. Like you'd think with such a large and engaged political base, finding people wouldn't be an issue.
Right. You'd think so, but the commentary suggests there's a certain hesitation.
Even among the MAGA world, as they put it.
Yeah. Like even within that group, there seems to be a reluctance to just completely abandon independent thought or even like basic professional boundaries.
Because at a certain point, your career, your reputation.
Exactly. And the commentary kind of puts it bluntly. They say there's a shortage of, and I'm quoting here, brain-dead stooges.
Yikes.
Yeah. Not exactly a ringing endorsement of the talent pool they're working with.
So then what? What happens if this, lack of staff persists? What could this mean going forward? The video actually looks at a couple of very different outcomes, and I think it's worth breaking those down.
Yeah, it's definitely worth considering the possibilities.
So on the one hand, and this is presented as the less likely scenario, you could argue that maybe this understaffing ends up being a good thing.
Okay, how so?
Well, the idea is that maybe it'll actually prevent some of the more controversial policies from being put into action.
Interesting. So, like, they just wouldn't have the manpower to carry out certain things?
Right, exactly. Like, think about it. Large-scale deregulation, mass deportations, these things take a ton of people to make happen.
And if those people aren't there?
Maybe those things just don't happen. The commentator kind of plays with this idea of, like, unintentional checks and balances.
Okay, so a government that's, like, incapable of fully staffing itself might inadvertently limit its own ability to make radical changes. I see what they're getting at.
But then they switch gears pretty quickly and say, okay, let's be real, this other scenario is probably more likely.
And that is?
Well, the idea is that if they can't find qualified people who are also completely 100% loyal.
They might just lower their standards.
Exactly, and that's where things get really dicey. Because then you're potentially looking at less qualified people, maybe even people with some shady backgrounds, getting appointed to these really important positions.
And that's a whole other can of worms.
Right, and the commentary even uses this kind of stark example. They talk about, like, scouring prisons for Capitol rioters as a potential source of these super loyal but maybe not so qualified candidates.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty extreme example, but I think it underscores the point they're trying to make.
Which is that this intense focus on loyalty above everything else could backfire in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, it raises this really fundamental question about what's more important. Having people who believe in your agenda or having people who can actually do the job?
Because running a government is a complicated business.
It is. And you need people with experience, with expertise to keep things running smoothly.
So the video ends by saying that, regardless of which way this goes, whether we end up with stalled policies or a bunch of unqualified appointees, the whole situation is not a good look for the U.S. government.
Yeah, it's definitely not ideal. And it really highlights this fundamental dilemma that every administration faces.
Just trying to find that balance between ideology and competence.
Exactly. You want people who believe in your vision, but you also need people who are capable of turning that vision into reality.
So just to kind of recap everything we've talked about, this Ring of Fire commentary argues that these demands for intense loyalty within a potential Trump administration are causing major staffing problems. And this could lead to one of two things. The less likely outcome is that it kind of accidentally limits what they're able to do.
Because they just don't have the staff to implement their plans.
Right. But the more concerning possibility is that they start filling these positions with people who, while loyal, might not be the best fit for the job. And that could have some pretty serious consequences for how effectively the government can function.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to, I think, the most important takeaway from all of this. What are the potential dangers of prioritizing one quality, like ideological alignment, so heavily over another, like competence when it comes to running a government? Are there ever situations where it makes sense to compromise one for the other?
It's a tough question with no easy answers. It's something that affects all of us, and it's definitely something worth pondering as we move forward.
For sure. Definitely a lot to think about.
Yeah, definitely.